I remember standing in the rain, my hands trembling, as the truth unfolded before me. My blindness wasn't fate. It was betrayal. My own parents stole my sight, gifting it to the daughter they chose over me. And yet, amidst this darkness, love found a way to shine. Welcome to the Untold Love, where hidden stories of heartbreak and hope are revealed. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I was born into a family where love should have been my first language, but instead, silence and comparison shaped my childhood. My parents had always longed for perfection, a perfect child, a perfect family, a perfect life. But when they looked at me, their eyes never carried pride. I was their daughter, yes, but never their treasure. My earliest memories are filled with small shadows, my mother brushing my hair while sighing as though something about me wasn't enough, my father's gaze wandering past me as if searching for something brighter. And then she came into our lives, the adopted daughter. She was beautiful, graceful, and adored in a way I never was. They called her their blessing, their light. And as they poured all their love into her, I learned how it felt to shrink into the background of my own home. I tried to be the obedient one, the quiet one, the child who wouldn't cause trouble. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I behaved well enough, they would see me too. But life doesn't reward silent longing. My vision began to blur when I was still young, shadows turning darker, colors fading into gray. Doctors said it was an illness. Something unfortunate but natural. And my parents, they told me to be strong, to accept it. Their words were gentle, but their eyes? Their eyes carried relief, as though my fading sight made it easier to forget me. But even in that darkness, I searched for pieces of light. I wanted to believe love could find me, even if not in my family. That's when I met him, the boy with a soft smile and a voice that felt like music. He would sit with me in the library, reading aloud the stories I could no longer see. Every word he spoke became a lantern in my night. For the first time, I felt what it meant to be seen, not with eyes, but with heart. He noticed the way I hesitated before stepping into a room, the way I tilted my head to catch sounds better than sights. He never pitied me. Instead, he gave me a gift no one else ever had, the feeling of being enough. And so, while my parents celebrated the daughter they had chosen, I held on to the boy who had chosen me, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. In his presence, I felt alive, and for a while, that was enough to keep my heart beating with hope. It was in the dim corners of the library that my world began to change. While my parents' house felt like a place where I was invisible, the library became my refuge, a sanctuary where silence was not cold, but comforting. I remember the first time I heard his voice there. Clear, gentle, and patient, it reached me before I even knew his name. He noticed me struggling, my fingers brushing over books I could no longer read, my eyes searching for words that had already slipped into darkness. Without hesitation, he offered to help. "Would you like me to read to you?" he asked softly. His tone carried no pity, only kindness. That moment became the beginning of something neither of us could have predicted. Day after day, he would sit beside me, a book open in his hands, his voice weaving worlds I could not see but could feel. Through him, I traveled to distant lands, met characters full of courage, and tasted the sweetness of dreams. Every page he read became a bridge between the life I had lost and the one I was still learning to live. But more than the stories, it was him. The way he would pause after a powerful sentence, waiting for me to breathe it in. The way his laughter warmed even the quietest corners of my heart. He was not just reading to me, he was teaching me to believe that even in darkness, beauty still existed. There were moments when I dared to lift my gaze toward him, my blurred sight catching only the outlines of his face. And yet, somehow, even in that haze, he felt like the clearest thing in my world. His presence made me feel visible, cherished in a way my parents had never allowed me to feel. Our bond grew quietly. Like roots under the soil, hidden but strong. He became my secret light, my anchor, my proof that not all love was conditional. I never confessed my feelings, too afraid that speaking them aloud might shatter the fragile magic we had. But deep inside, I knew, what we shared was not ordinary. In a life where I was constantly made to feel less, he made me feel whole. And in those tender hours spent between the whispers of pages and the rhythm of his voice, I realized something life-changing. Even if the world had stolen my sight, it had given me him. And that, to me, felt like destiny's most beautiful gift. They say the cruelest truths are the ones whispered in silence, the ones never meant for you to hear. For years, I believed my blindness was a curse of fate, a cruel twist written in the stars. But fate wasn't to blame. It was them, my own parents. I still remember that night. The house was quiet, the air heavy with secrets. I had woken up thirsty and wandered down the hallway, my hands brushing the wall for guidance. That's when I heard their voices from the next room, low, trembling, filled with words that pierced me deeper than any wound ever could. My mother's voice cracked as she said, "She doesn't know, and she never will." It was the only way. Our adopted daughter needed sight, and we gave it to her. It was her chance at life. My father sighed heavily, replying, "But what about our real daughter? We took everything from her." And then came the words that shattered me. She was never strong enough. She wouldn't have achieved much with her life anyway. In that moment, the world spun. My knees weakened, and I had to clutch the wall to keep myself standing. My blindness wasn't an illness. It was a theft. My parents had stolen my sight, piece by piece, choice by choice, just to gift it to the daughter they cherished more than me. I wanted to scream, to burst into the room and demand answers, but my voice froze in my throat. Tears spilled down my cheeks silently, hot with betrayal. Every memory suddenly twisted into something darker, my mother's distant eyes, my father's silence, their relief at my fading vision. None of it had been natural. None of it had been fate. I stumbled back to my room, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. That night, the darkness around me felt heavier than ever. Not because I could not see, but because the very people who should have protected me had been the ones to destroy me. And the cruelest part? I realized I wasn't just blind to the world, I had been blind to the truth all along. The night of the accident still lives inside me, etched into my soul like an unhealed scar. I remember the sound first, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the deafening silence that followed. In those final moments, I felt weightless, as if the world itself had let go of me. I wasn't afraid of dying. What terrified me was the memory I carried into that darkness, the memory of betrayal. My parents' words echoed in my head as my body grew cold. She wouldn't have achieved much with her life anyway. That was how they saw me. That was how they defined me. And yet, even in those last breaths, I thought of him, the boy whose voice had once been my light. I wondered if he would miss me, if he would remember the girl who clung to stories when her world had gone dark. My heart ached not because life was ending, but because love was unfinished. I thought it was the end. But death, it seemed, was not the closing of my story, it was the turning of a page. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in a hospital. I wasn't lying in broken glass or drowning in pain. I was back, in my old bedroom, surrounded by walls I hadn't touched in years. My hands trembled as I reached for the familiar wooden desk, the faded curtains. Everything was the same, and yet, different. I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Younger. My eyes still carried faint light, not complete darkness. My breath hitched. Was this a dream? Or had fate truly given me another chance? Tears welled up as the realization struck, I had been reborn. Returned to a time before betrayal, before the theft of my sight, before everything crumbled. My heart pounded. With a mix of disbelief and determination. This time, I promised myself, things would not be the same. I would no longer be the silent girl who waited for love that never came. I would no longer let their choices dictate my fate. Rebirth wasn't just a gift, it was a challenge. To face the truth. To protect the love I had once lost. To reclaim the life stolen from me. And as I stood there, trembling but alive, I whispered to myself, this time, I will not let them take everything away. Rebirth gave me a chance to rewrite my destiny, but it also carried the heavy burden of truth. Every glance at my parents now felt sharper, every smile from them colder, because I knew what they were capable of. They thought I was still the naive daughter who craved their approval. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I began to keep my distance. I spoke less, observed more. Their laughter with the adopted daughter rang through the house, just as it always had. Only now, I no longer ached for it, I studied it. Every gesture, every word, every look they gave her was proof that I had always been second. One evening, I finally confronted my mother. My voice trembled, but my heart was steel. Tell me, mother, I asked quietly, if I had been born blind, would you still have kept me? Or would you have given me away, just like my sight? Her hands froze mid-motion, the dish she was washing slipping back into the sink. For a long moment, she said nothing. And in that silence, I found my answer. Sometimes, words aren't needed. To reveal the truth, the absence of them speaks louder. Inside, I broke. Outside, I smiled, a small bitter curve of lips. It was the first time I realized that forgiveness would never come from them, and love would never be mine to beg for. But while my parents' betrayal burned deeper with every passing day, my time with him, the boy who once read to me, became my only solace. His presence was still the soft light I clung to. Yet, every time he smiled at me, I felt a new fear take root. What if this second chance still led to losing him? What if truth destroyed the one bond one treasured most? I wanted to hold him close, to confess the love I had buried for so long. But my heart was torn between two battles, the fight to protect myself from my parents, and the fear of hurting the one person who had never wronged me. In this new life, my path was no longer clear. It was a battlefield of choices, each heavier than the last. And I knew, sooner or later, my silence would end, and the storm between us all would finally break. Love has a way of arriving when you least expect it, and testing you when you least feel ready. In this second life, I thought I could keep my feelings for him hidden, just as I had before. But love is stubborn, it seeps through silence, it lingers in every glance. One evening, beneath the soft glow of a setting sun, he looked at me differently. His voice was unsteady, his hands fidgeting, as if words had been building inside him for years. I don't know when it happened. He whispered, but being with you feels like the only thing that makes sense in my life. For a moment, the world stilled. My heart surged with warmth, but fear coiled around it like a snake. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that I had always felt the same. But how could I? How could I love him freely when the truth of my stolen sight hovered between us like a shadow? I smiled instead, fragile and uncertain. Inside, guilt gnawed at me. If he knew everything, if he knew my life had been torn apart so another could see, would he still choose me? Or would pity poison what we had? Meanwhile, my adopted sister began to sense something had shifted. She watched me closely, suspicion flickering in her eyes. She had always been the cherished one, the daughter bathed in attention, the one with the life that had once belonged to me. Perhaps it was instinct, or perhaps fate itself whispering to her, but I could feel her unease growing each day. The closer I drew to him, the heavier her gaze became. It was as if she feared losing something she wasn't even supposed to have. The twist of it all was unbearable, my parents' favoritism, my sister's hidden guilt, and the boys' growing love. I stood caught between truth and desire, between silence and confession. Every moment with him felt like a borrowed dream, one I was afraid would vanish if I dared to speak the truth aloud. Yet the more I hid, the more my heart longed to break free. Love had found me in the darkness, but truth threatened to tear it all apart. And I knew the day was coming when I could no longer hide, when my silence would turn into revelation, no matter the cost. The truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply you try to bury it. For days, I carried the weight of silence in my chest, each heartbeat echoing with the secret I could no longer keep. My love for him was real, but so was the darkness of my past. And eventually, both collided. It happened during a family gathering. The air was thick with tension I could no longer ignore. My parents sat proudly beside my adopted sister, their smiles wide, their voices filled with affection. I sat across from them, watching, my hands trembling in my lap. And then, something in me snapped. I rose to my feet, my voice shaking but steady enough to cut through the room. "Do you want to know the truth?" I asked, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "Do you want to know why my world turned dark while hers was filled with light?" My parents stiffened, their faces paling. My sister's spoon clattered against her plate. Silence fell heavy, pressing against every heart in the room. I told them everything. How I had overheard their confession, how they had stolen my sight to give it to her, how they had chosen her happiness over my very existence. Each word poured out like fire, scorching the fragile walls of lies they had built for years. My mother wept, her hands covering her face. My father stared at the ground, shame written across his silence. And my sister, she broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I never knew. I never asked for this." But the wound was already carved too deep. Their regret couldn't erase the years of loneliness, nor could their tears restore the innocence I had lost. Through it all, he stood beside me, the boy who had been my light when my world went dark. He reached for my trembling hands, holding them with a quiet strength that told me I wasn't alone anymore. The unraveling of lies did not bring back what was stolen, but it freed me. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their secrets. I wasn't silently suffering. I had spoken my truth, and though it broke us all, it was also the beginning of my healing. The house was filled with sobs and silence, but inside me, there was finally peace, because the darkness no longer belonged to me. When the storm of truth finally passed, I was left standing in the ruins of what I once called family. My parents avoided my eyes, drowning in their guilt, while my adopted sister could no longer meet me without tears. For years, I had begged for their love, their approval, their care, but in that moment, I realized I no longer needed it. Forgiveness is not forgetting, nor is it excusing. It is choosing to free yourself from the weight of pain. And so, I let go. Not for them, but for me. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't demand they pay back what could never be returned. My sight was gone, my childhood stolen, but my spirit, my choices, my love, those were still mine. And I refused to let their betrayal define the rest of my life. He was beside me through it all. When my hands shook, he held them. When my voice cracked, he steadied it with his silence. And when I doubted myself, he reminded me of the girl he had always seen, the girl who was more than her scars, more than her pain. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with colors I could no longer see, he whispered to me, "You don't need eyes to see, not when your heart already holds so much light." Those words healed something inside me that no apology ever could. I realized then, love is not about what the world gives or takes from you, it is about the soul that chooses to stay, even when everything else falls apart. My parents had taken my sight, but life had given me a different gift, the courage to rise again, and someone who chose to walk beside me. So I chose peace. I chose love. I chose to step forward, not as the broken girl who had been betrayed, but as the woman who had survived, endured, and found her own strength. And in that moment, holding his hand, I whispered softly, "Love is the only sight I need." The story of my rebirth wasn't just about regaining what was stolen, it was about discovering who I truly was. And that truth, at last, was mine.